Great one for you here. Hopped on with Jake of Locked On Braves to talk all things Atlanta Braves prospects. Do you trade some of these pitchers? Which of these hitters could step up? What should you do? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Really excited to bring you this one. I hopped on end of the week last week with Jake from Locked On Braves for a wide-ranging Atlanta Braves conversation. We talked about some of these position players, David McCabe, Ignacio Alvarez. Can Alvarez play shortstop? What about Seven Sabalos? We talked about some of the pitchers, AJ Smith-Shawver versus Hurston Waldrep. Do you trade either one? What are their ceilings? What's their potential? Just a lot of great things in this show. Obviously, just barely scratched the surface of this system, but really fun conversation. Enjoy.
It's going to be a good discussion today. I have Lindsay Crosby joining me from Locked On MLB Prospects. We're really talking about some Braves prospects who could break out in 2024. And I know a lot of people think that this farm system is not very good. And look, it's not. There's not a lot of top-end talent, not a lot of top 100 prospects, but there are some guys coming up and the bottom of this farm system who I think have a chance to really break out in 2024. And I'm really interested to hear what Lindsay has to say and some prospects that he is keeping his eye on. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Lindsay. Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me. Really excited to hear what you have to say on this topic with the Braves prospects, because I think a lot of people sleep on this system, especially some guys at the bottom.
Yeah, and this is a system that you don't need as much from as most teams do. I mean, Atlanta has every single defensive position locked up for at least 3 or more years, if not 5 or 6. And you have a really good rotation for 2024. And obviously that's the big caveat is what do you do after that? So excited to be here. This is the least prep I've ever had to do for a show because I am a Braves fan too. And this is my system. So really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, in case you don't know, Lindsay Crosby is also the host over at BravesToday.com, always putting out articles, just about 2 or 3, it seems like, every day. Plenty of content over there on BravesToday.com, so make sure you go check him out. Not just for my work, but all the good stuff that Lindsay's doing over there as well. And as I mentioned, host of Locked On MLB Prospects, so nobody better to talk to about the Brave system than Lindsay. Let's jump right into the big question and the headline for this podcast. Who are some unknown prospects? And when I say unknown, prospects outside of the top 10 and mostly at the lower levels. Who are some prospects in this system that you think could break out in 2024? Maybe jump into that top 10 in the Braves farm system rankings.
So a guy that I'm watching just based on how I know Atlanta can improve pitchers is Garrett Bowman. Higher pick last year, but 6'8", 240, absolutely big boy. And when you watch what he does on the mound, he's not using almost any of that size, right? It's a very, very long arm action. He doesn't have a lot of biomechanical smoothness from the upper to the lower half. And so, he's getting into the low 90s. He's throwing enough strikes, but he's doing that with virtually just the entire arm. It's a clean arm action. Atlanta likes clean arm actions, but I trust the Braves to be able to get more efficiency in that delivery and get the biomechanical change. It's a fastball changeup combination now, which it's weird to see a prep draftee with a great changeup. The slider got better in just a little bit that we saw last year. He started throwing it a little bit harder. We know Atlanta likes the gyro sliders. And so I don't necessarily know if he'll ever get into like the top 3 or top 5, but top 10 seems to me to be a very real possibility because I trust Atlanta to get some more velocity, get him up to consistently a 95 or 96. Improve that slider, again, make it harder. Maybe it's more of a cutter when they're done with it. And then the changeup that tunnels really well with that fastball, it's going to work really well at the lower levels. Changeups always do. The question will be in 25, what does it look like when he's in the upper minors with that 3-pitch combination?
Yeah, that's one I had written down on my list as well. I told Lindsay coming in, I probably had a list of 5, 6 names, maybe
Same.
7, I think, on here that are just, I think, I'm really excited about. And Garrett was definitely one of those. Just the size. You look at a kid like that, I mean, and there's just so much that you can dream on. So really excited about the potential for him. I'm going to mention another pitcher to you that I had on my list, and somebody that I think is already kind of creeping up radars a little bit, especially with how he finished 2023. But Giancarlo Lara is somebody that, like I said, the second half of 2023 really started to rack up the strikeouts. And I think he's somebody coming into this offseason, you're starting to see his stock rise a little bit for those, especially, you're in a deep dynasty league. I know I went and picked him up, but that's another arm as well that just seems to be coming up the Braves system and somebody that might surprise.
Yeah, he's a guy, he reminds me of Orion Kerkering of the Phillies in the context of he has a sweeper as a slider that is a lot harder than a lot of them are. It's not a true sweeper, but it's mostly sweep, sits in the upper 80s. I've seen him run it up to 90, and a lot of those sweepers sit in the lower 80s. So the fastball's upper 90s, the changeup sits upper 80s. He's got a sweeper with more velocity on it. And as you watched him last year, the walk rate got better. His command, his control all improved. The question's going to be when he gets to Double-A Mississippi, what happens? They're not going to have that annoying tacky ball. So it's going to be easy to evaluate these guys, but what does he do when he faces better hitters that don't necessarily swing at everything? And can he more consistently land that slider for a strike? That's going to be the big determinant as to how high he goes in the system.
Yeah, and I think also whether or not he's a starter, or I think he has a very safe floor as a pretty high leverage reliever as well with the stuff that he has. But certainly if he can put it all together, maybe add another pitch in there, I think he's somebody that could be a mid, maybe even number 2 type of starter in the rotation. So excited about him. What about a bat? The Braves have a lot of pitching depth in their system. Everybody's wondering who's going to be that next bat. Ignacio Alvarez up there, David McCabe, Drake Baldwin is kind of that group. I think right now most would consider the 3 best bats. Anybody outside of that you think has a chance to jump up in 2024?
So Luis Guanipa had a really interesting time in the DSL because his slugging wasn't great, right? I think he had a 384 slug in the DSL, but he has the raw power, he has the speed, and then it feels like this is, if he can make consistent contact and if he can work on the launch angle a little bit, it feels like he's someone who could absolutely explode. But the big guy to me, Sabin Ceballos, the draft pick out of Oregon. Atlanta's trying him at shortstop. He was a third baseman, won a Gold Glove in college, or the college version of a Gold Glove. But he showed decent power with metal. What does it translate to wood? It didn't do a great job in his post-draft time. He didn't hit for a ton of power, but it feels like the natural ability is there. My question is going to be, I guess, one, defensively, how does he handle? And the contact skills are there. The plate discipline's there. The frame is there. He's 6'3", 220. He didn't chase a lot in college. I want to say his chase rate was around 16%, and his in-zone contact was over 90%. So all the skills are there. It's just how well does it translate to wood? That's a big one for me. And the sooner he gets into high A and he's not in Rome's ballpark, I think the better you'll see him perform statistically.
Yeah, Ceballos, another one I had on my list as well. I did a deep dive on him already this offseason. He's somebody I'm really excited about. Really confident hitter in the box, too. Has a little bit of swag to him as well. So really excited to see how he develops. I'm going to give you one more here.
Okay.
Another guy that I picked up in a deep fantasy league, and that's Mario Baez. Really, big numbers early on. Obviously, in the DSL, you take those with a grain of salt. But somebody who, again, we're looking for any type of bat in this organization to come up, just 17 years old. Is this somebody that maybe could impress and shoot up some rankings?
When you watch, he walked almost as much as he struck out, which is really rare for guys of that age, albeit the DSL's never known for great pitching quality. I think the big thing to me is he optimizes the contact that he does make. He's not a big guy. He's like 5'9", 175. And if there's not a growth spurt in there, it's something where the contact ability is good enough. The quality of the contact is good enough. I think that how he does when he gets into complex level, how that transition goes is going to tell you a lot. But it feels like he's a 15 home run, 25 stolen base kind of potential. It's just what does it translate when you get stateside? Always a question, but if there's a growth spurt in there, you might have a guy.
Yeah, and I think he played all of last year at 16, so I think he just turned 17, so still really young. So there are some interesting names there for sure, especially at the lower levels to keep an eye on. Again, I had Guanipa down, Lara, Ceballos, Adam Mayer's guy. If we get to see him pitch, just really interested to see what he can do. Mario Baez, Isaiah Drake, who they just drafted, didn't have the best pro debut, but certainly somebody with a lot of skills. Garrett Bauman, as he mentioned, and Blake Burkhalter, War Eagle. Again, him getting back maybe the second half of this year, but somebody, if they do put him in the bullpen, they're initially going to start him out as a starter or try him as a starter. But he's somebody I think if they worked him into the bullpen, could move pretty quickly. So those are some names that I'm keeping an eye on in 2024 as well that I think could break through for the Braves. All right, next we'll go to the top of the system. I want to get Lindsay's thoughts on AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrep. What's the future with them? Is there a future with the Braves? What kind of impact do they have in 2024? We'll discuss all that next.
Back to our conversation with Jake in just a minute. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. As we've been talking about, the World Series odds are out for 2024. And as of Sunday, the 24th, the Atlanta Braves are second in the World Series odds behind the Los Angeles Dodgers. Dodgers are at plus 380. Braves are at plus 650. Obviously, the Dodgers added $1 billion of payroll commitments, and Atlanta signed a bunch of relievers, and traded for an outfielder. But it is still something where a lot of your Atlanta Braves are still considered to be a lot of the favorites for some of the stuff. National League MVP, the favorite, Ronald Acuna Jr., plus 500. National League Cy Young favorite, Spencer Strider, plus 550. Max Fried's in the top 6, plus 1,400. And so, very, very good team. You can go out and you can play some of the action now while everybody's loving the Dodgers and their chances. You can go get a little bit of value on the Braves lines. If you want some free money to do it, go place a winning $5 money line bet and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. So $150 in bonus bets if you can pick an NFL team to win on the money line. So tons of fun at FanDuel. Go check it out. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network.
I want to also remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lindsay, let's jump back into the prospect talk here. And because you edit all of my articles, I've probably written at least 10 this offseason talking about the future of this Braves rotation. As you mentioned at the top, prospect-wise, the Braves don't really have to worry about having a great farm system because position players are locked up. But if there is one thing that they desperately need, it is starting pitching. After this season, if Max Fried is gone, Charlie Morton is gone, there's a lot of question marks behind Spencer Strider. They're going to need some players to step up in the rotation. And that's what I've talked about on the podcast last Wednesday, is who is going to step up, and I wrote an article about it on Braves Today as well. I think there's 6 guys in particular that have the ability to step up in 2024 and cement a spot in the rotation. But just looking at prospects, the two everybody points to, AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrep. And I'm going to ask you the questions that I've asked my followers and people have asked, or listeners, and people have asked me. If you were going to trade one of them, which one would you rather trade?
That's tough. And I don't want them to get mad. I know they watch your show. They sometimes watch my show. To me, it feels like AJ Smith-Shawver is better able to help you now. It feels like Hurston Waldrep could potentially have the higher ceiling. And so I don't really want to trade either one of them because you're in the situation.
And that's a question too. Yeah. That's a question too. And that's kind of another article I've written over on bravestoday.com is how do you justify trading for now and giving up the future? Because you trade for Dylan Cease and you can't extend him, and you have to give up one of these two guys in this deal, then you're in the same spot. So there's definitely a third option there. You don't have to trade one of these guys, but I'm kind of leaning towards just develop these two. I mean, you haven't had two really good pitching prospects like this, I think, in quite some time since the Soroka, Ian Andersons of the world came up. I think, I lean towards holding on to these two.
Yeah, that's where I am right now. And that's what it feels like Atlanta's kind of prepared to do. You have a 1-4 already set at the major league level in 2024. And so we know, I asked point blank at the winter meetings, what are the expectations for AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrep? And I think Alex Anthopoulos had a really good answer. He said, if you think about it, AJ Smith-Shawver is the same age. He would be going into his draft eligible year in college. And so he obviously didn't put expectations like numbers on it. But Hurston Waldrep, AJ Smith-Shawver, they're both going to be in spring training. They're going to have a chance to make the rotation. And to me, you have 2024 as almost a test run for these two guys. What level are they going to be able to compete at in Major League Baseball? Can they start all year? Are they starting part of the year because of workload? Are they back into the rotation? Are they middle of the rotation? I don't expect anybody in their rookie year to be a front of the rotation guy. That's not reasonable. Max Fried wasn't that. But I think at the end of 2024, even by the trade deadline, Atlanta's going to have a much better idea of, in 2025, if Max Fried does not come back, when the postseason comes around, how much trouble are we in if this is our number 2 and our number 3? And ultimately, I think that together you can probably get one full season out of them. I just don't know how reliable it is, especially for AJ Smith-Shawver and the less innings he's pitched in his career, how reliable it is to count on them to give you full seasons in 2024. But I think both of them have the ability to show they are postseason starters with enough seasoning in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think the answer I had on my podcast last Wednesday is similar to what you said, in that I think AJ Smith-Shawver, I think he's going to give you some innings this year at the big league level. I think he's going to give you some spot starts. But Hurston Waldrep is the guy that I think, gives you the best chance, or has the best chance this year to say, okay, he is in the rotation going forward. Yeah. Maybe it's because I'm a college guy. I know you are as well. I cover the SEC. You cover Auburn as well. And I just watch Hurston Waldrep pitch too much, and his stuff is too nasty, and that splitter is just too devastating. I feel like he's going to be able to come up and get big league hitters out right away, as AJ Smith-Shawver was as well. Not taking anything away from him, but I guess I've just seen it more from Waldrep, and I think he's maybe a little bit more mature. He's a year older, even though he was just drafted this past year. So I feel like Waldrep is the guy that, of the two, if I would say one of them is going to prove this year that they have earned a rotation spot going forward, I think it is Waldrep. And I think we get to see that this year. I think at some point, maybe not to start the year, but I think we do see Waldrep come up. And when he does, it's all about command for both of these guys. Mm-hmm. But again, I think he just has a better chance of taking hold of a spot and really just running with it. And that's what the Braves need, Lindsay. They need some guys to step up in this rotation. So outside of those two, which, I think those are probably the two top 100 prospects the Braves have. I don't know, every ranking might not have both of those guys in there, but I think they're both top 100 prospects in my mind. Mm-hmm. Outside of those two, who in this Braves system could you see, rising into the top 100? I know we talked about breakouts, but I don't think any of those are going to be top 100 prospects by the end of the year. But, a Schwellenbach, who was, an all-star last year. So Cade Keeler, Owen Murphy, any of these guys have a chance to really jump up in the top 100, some guys at the higher levels?
So one, Schwellenbach was one of my answers there. And I think a big reason for that is if you look at what he was able to do last year, coming back from Tommy John, the thing that he surprisingly did well was having the control. That's usually the last thing to come back with a guy coming back from Tommy John. 2.49 ERA in, 16 starts, mostly in Augusta, some in Rome. And I know that those ballparks kind of suppress home runs. The entire Braves minor league system suppresses home runs for hitters, especially Mississippi. It's not great. But he still gave up 3 home runs in 65 innings. And to me, the quality of the stuff for Schwellenbach tells me that he should be able to, provided he can more consistently land the fastball for a strike and get ahead in the count, he should be able to show multiple tools where I am a top 100 prospect. So I'm high on him. Lucas Braun is a guy that I'm a little bit hesitant on because of his size. He's not the biggest guy in the world, But when you look at what he did after the draft, just how many innings he went out and pitched. He was second in strikeouts among 2023 draftees, behind only Hurston Waldrep. It's somebody, they obviously have a lot of faith and a lot of belief in him. I don't know if he'll be able to do enough to get into the top 100, but I think he's going to come up into the conversation for the Braves of that top 10. And it's just the question of, with the frame being a little bit smaller, what's the overall ceiling and workload expectations for a guy like that?
Yeah, Lucas Braun's a guy I talked about, I think, this past Minors Monday. It's somebody, really good control, not a high velo guy, but certainly has some good stuff and good command of it that I think has a pretty safe floor. Like you said, it's how high can that ceiling get for him? Can he become a mid-rotation type of guy? Certainly an interesting one there. I haven't put my rankings together yet, but I'll just go ahead and tell you, if not for the injury to J.R. Ritchie, he would have been ranked third on my list, and I may still put him third. He was one of the guys when I went watching back film this year that I was just blown away by and how good the stuff was. It was even better than I thought. And I would have had Schwellenbach right behind him. To me, it's AJ Smith-Shawver and Waldrep as a tier. And then I got, in the tier behind that, Schwellenbach and J.R. Ritchie. So I'm really high on both of those guys. Hopefully Ritchie gets back healthy soon. Don't know if we'll probably won't see him much at all in 2024, but hopefully he has a good recovery. Got a couple more questions I want to ask Lindsay here, including Ignacio Alvarez. Can he stay at shortstop? Could he be the shortstop of the future for the Braves? I'll ask him that and more here next. Want to remind you one more time that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lindsay, getting back into our discussion here of Braves prospects, kind of teased it there a second ago. Ignacio Alvarez, he's somebody, I got his rookie card over here behind me somewhere. He's one of my favorite players in the system. Just kind of got attached to him last year and have kind of been riding that wave. I love the hit tool. Obviously, you need to see a little bit more power out of him. Braves have been playing him at shortstop. I'll be honest, and I haven't watched a ton of video on him, but the games I've watched, I just don't see him as a shortstop. But you look at the guys who do watch him every game, and the coaches talk about him and talk about his good hands. And I do see some good quick hands there. It's really the range for me. I think the arm's fine. It's really much more so the range. But as you look at the position players at the big league level, we talked about in every position pretty much being locked up, shortstop is one that you kind of have some question about going forward. Orlando Arcia is fine. I think he's going to be, a serviceable league average type of shortstop, but the Braves don't have that future shortstop right now in the system, in my mind. Ambioris Taveras really struggling with the bat. Alvarez is the one that if he can stay at shortstop, I think he has that chance and that opportunity to be the shortstop of the future.
And I think that's kind of why you see them talk to Seven Ceballos about, we're going to have you try to go from third back to shortstop and see how that works. I kind of agree with you on Alvarez. When he gets to a ball, he's going to make the play, right? He's reliable hands. The arm can make all the throws. It's just, can he get to the ball? That's the question. And in this age of no defensive shifts, there's only so much you can do from a positioning perspective to mitigate the lack of range. Now, having a guy like Austin Riley next to you can help with that somewhat as well. People inside the system, inside the organization, they're high on his ability to take shortstop. Most folks I talk to from outside the organization are not. And so I think it's going to be really big in 2024 to kind of get the answer to that question. But a lot of mock drafts that we see have Atlanta going out and taking a shortstop in the first round for the reason you mentioned. There's not really a slam dunk shortstop prospect that you can feel good about in this system. And I've seen prep shortstops. I've seen college shortstops. It's all going to come down to how well do Ceballos and Alvarez do it short this year. And for both of them, I think that they're going to be fine, but I don't think either one of them is going to end up being a plus defender there. And so it's going to be hard to eventually think of, we can move on from the average shortstop we have to plug in an average shortstop.
Yeah, and really the question, you kind of, with Dansby Swanson, it was somebody who struggled early on in his career, but then really came on late and was always just kind of that winning player. But, the Braves just are still kind of been looking for that guy to kind of take over. And Arcia, an all-star last year for certain, but I don't think that's what many people think he's going to be long-term. And he's a guy that I just feel like, he makes the plays at shortstop. It's an above average arm. It's not great range, but as we talked about with Alvarez, somebody who's going to make the plays. And you're hoping Von Grissom was going to turn into that and maybe be the future shortstop. I don't think that's the case. He's playing third base and left field right now in the Puerto Rican League, trying to, new positions there. So that would kind of lead you to believe that shortstop isn't really his future. And the Braves weren't as encouraged by his defense this past year, but there's just not that obvious shortstop right now in the system for the Braves. Now, I want to ask you one more question here as we get ready to wrap things up. Is there anybody we haven't talked about? Because I feel like we have talked about just about everybody, but is there anybody else in this system, that we haven't discussed yet that you're just really excited to see in 2024?
So kind of quiet, doesn't get a lot of attention. Cedric the Grand Prix is a guy to me, fits a lot of the buckets that Atlanta likes to go into. They like athletic guys. He's somebody like AJ Smith-Shawver, doesn't have a ton of experience. And so I'm curious to see what he can be with another full year in the system, a chance to start every fifth day versus, starting once a week or whatever it might be. I'm curious about him. And then I do want to give a word of caution for everybody about David McCabe. I like David McCabe. I think he's going to be a candidate to potentially be a DH in a couple of years. I wrote that at Braves Today just a couple of days ago. But he's getting ready to move from Augusta to Mississippi. And as a power hitter, Mississippi is probably the worst ballpark you could go in for home runs. From a park factor perspective, it is, if 100 is neutral, it comes at about 42. It suppresses power production significantly. Now the Braves will be able to properly evaluate him. They were confident calling up Michael Harris straight from AA because they had the metrics, but we're not going to see the power production that we were expecting, I think, from David McCabe this year when he gets there. And I want folks to not panic. Some of that's going to be the ballpark he's in versus issues that he may personally have.
Yeah, AA South, I think is what they're now calling it again, is a league where it is not great for judging power. There are some tough ballparks to hit in that league. Birmingham, I know, is typically one of those as well. So, Yeah, you got to be cautious with that. Another thing, again, we talked about college baseball earlier. Another thing I kind of remind our listeners of as well is to take college numbers, especially offensive numbers, with a grain of salt. Offense, in my mind, at the college level seems to just be completely out of whack at the moment. Offensive numbers, home run numbers in general, were just super high this past year. Do you feel the same way when kind of evaluating college players? You see good pitchers. I mean, Hurston Waldrep, his ERA was elevated this past year. You see good pitchers with good stuff this past season with high ERA numbers. Do you kind of feel the same way that offense at the college level is kind of overblown right now?
Offense has gotten so good in college. And to me, from talking to folks at different schools, it's the game planning. For Hurston Waldrep, they had a very definitive plan of he can't reliably land the splitter in the zone for a strike. And so you can, in essence, if he doesn't have it, and you'll know in the first inning, you can disregard it. You can sit fastball. He's going to either walk a bunch of guys or you're going to crush him.
Game 2 of the College World Series.
Exactly. The data's gotten so good. The game planning's gotten so good. And then obviously the advantage you have using composite bats, using spin ball machines to get used to facing a particularly tough pitcher. The offense has been so good in college baseball that it skews things a little bit. I think looking at what Hurston Waldrep did when he got into the minor league system, like, it shows that it's almost easier sometimes to play in high A or even maybe double A than it is to play in the SEC and the College World Series.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. The SEC, see Wyatt Langford, you see Dylan Cruz, Paul Skeens, some of the top draft picks from this past year going off the board very high. So it's definitely, like I said, I cover the SEC in college baseball. It's definitely the best conference in all of baseball. I'm glad we get to watch that. But again, you gotta, you take a little grain of salt. You look at some of these college numbers in my mind, just because I think they are a little bit overpowered at the moment. And like you said, they're all watching video now. It is much more deeper, especially in the SEC, where, Lindsay, it means more.
It does mean more.
It's exactly what you see. Lindsay, thanks so much for joining. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can find all your work because you are all over the place.
Thank you. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. It's the hub for everything. If you're looking for college baseball, most of my stuff is talking about Auburn University, but that's auburndaily.com. Obviously, my show, Locked On MLB Prospects, wherever you get your podcasting on YouTube. And if you're looking for my Major League Baseball writing, bravestoday.com, where, again, I edit just about every single piece that Jake writes.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of places you can see Lindsay's doing a lot of great work out there. Make sure you follow him. Go listen to Locked On MLB Prospects as well. You want to get to know prospects better, get to know everything about the upcoming prospects. Make sure that you are subscribed there on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Again, Merry Christmas to all of you listening, whether you're listening on Christmas Day, hopefully not. Hopefully you're spending time with loved ones. But whenever you do, give us a listen or a watch. I do appreciate it. And thanks for all the support you give me here at Locked On Braves. Follow us on social media at ShortstopBall and at LockedOn_Braves. And one more time, make sure you subscribe on YouTube and make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until then, we will talk to you next time.